So, Brad, I want to start with you. So two years ago, we were here with a show called The People versus O.J. Simpson, which went on, thank you, which went on to win 9 Emmy Awards. And I remember you and I talking about how nervous we were about doing a follow-up, about trying to sort of, go in the shadow of something that was so popular and acclaimed. And yet, here we are. So can you talk about the process of why this show? Why this story?
Well, first of all, my partner, Nina Jacobson, who can't be here tonight, and I had never done TV before OJ. So we started with something that was great, but felt really tough to follow up. And I think the first reason why this show, the starting point is because Ryan said, I want to do Versace next. So it wasn't, but it was something we started developing, in our first, Nina didn't know Ryan that well, and so we were having one of those first initial, meetings with him. We were talking about the franchise, and we went to lunch, and he said, I've always wanted to do the story of Andrew Kanata.
I feel like Ryan is sitting over here like...
That's right. And as a producer, you're still in that thing where you're like, you can't be totally honest at a lunch yet. You're feeling somebody out. And so he said to us, I want to do the story of Andrew Kanata, and we were like, that sounds like a great idea. And then he left, and we were like, what the fuck is that? To each other. What is that? And I don't mean that we didn't really know the depth of the story.
Mm-hmm.
We knew that Andrew Kanata had killed Versace, and he was crazy, and there had been a media frenzy around it. But that was it. So we read Maureen's book, and Maureen's book wasn't just about Versace. It was about this young man that I would have been friends with at high school. This young man who loved new wave music and Brideshead Revisited and was sort of out in some ways in high school, and who was unstable but wasn't destined to be a killer. He wasn't like Jeffrey Dahmer. He wasn't one of those people who's torturing puppies. It was a child who grew up in a world full of hate, who grew up in this terrible household, and was made to be a killer, both by society and by his parents. And that sort of opened it up for us. But the other thing that really opened it up is we always wanted to work with Tom Rob Smith. I tried to option his first book when it came out, Child 44. He sold it to somebody else instead of me. But I'd always pursued him, and we sent it to him, and he instantly read it and said, I have a whole take on this. And that started rolling. We didn't know it was going to be the next thing, but he wrote the first episode, and I remember we gave it to Ryan, and he called us, and he met with Tom and talked about what he wanted it to be, and he said, I love this, I know exactly how to direct this, and we're going to make this next. And that led to this.
But what I loved about the story, even as a young guy living in LA, I was very haunted by it. And for me, it was, I thought, American Crime Story at its best is something that tackles social issues and explores them. It's not just really about just a crime. It's about something more societal, I think, at its best. So Tom, can you talk about what attracted you to the material? You speak so movingly about your first flush when you heard about it, what you thought it could be. Why were you interested at this point in your life to write about? And he wrote every episode, by the way. Deserves a big round of applause.
Actually, one of the first things I said to Brad and Nina when they sent the book was, this is an incredibly compelling story, but it's difficult and complicated. It's a cast predominantly of gay characters. I was very frank. I was like, can we get it made? And the truth is, without Ryan's support, it wouldn't have got made. I don't know if it would have made anywhere else. And there's an enormous sense of gratitude that it even exists as a piece. So I want to sort of get that said. But one of the things was, this was a story that we knew a tiny fragment of, and it was curious to me why, as a gay man who writes about true crime, my first book was loosely based on a true crime narrative. I've listened to a lot of podcasts. Why I didn't know the story, how we'd missed our own stories somehow, hadn't them been swept under the carpet. And it was an extraordinary experience to have the spotlight shone on these young men and older men and people from Minneapolis and people from Chicago whose lives I knew nothing about, who had struggled to find an existence in America despite being and they carved out this world for themselves. And the people who managed to do that, such as Jeffrey Trout and David Madison, and the people who failed to do that with very destructive consequences, Andrew Cunanan. So this was a story that was kind of very rarely perfectly balanced. You had someone who was completely broken by homophobia against all the people that have managed to overcome it. And so it felt like a very rare, perfectly balanced piece of social commentary.
Why do you think it's so topical? Because one of the things that I'm struck by when I watch it is how it is a period piece, a contemporary period piece, but it feels so modern to me. The things that we were grappling with then, in a different way, we're still grappling with. That's why I was so moved, I think, ultimately by it. Can you talk about that a little bit?
I think a big part of that is this question of identity and how we fit into society. And those questions don't really go away. It was interesting because I was asked about it recently, that it was a period piece. And I'd almost forgotten that it was. Of course it is, and you know you're going back in time. But it's not like a museum piece where you put it behind glass and we all kind of look at it. It feels very explosive and reactive as a piece, very provocative. When I was reading about Andrew, even though there is a gap, it just felt to me like I was reading about myself growing up. I was like full of ambition. How do I fit in this world? How do we interact with this world? How do we find our place in this world? Those questions actually never go away. And I think lots of the things, for some reason, which have felt historic, actually, strangely, when we started work on this, such as the Don't Ask, Don't Tell piece, which has been so extraordinary in episode 5, which is heartbreaking, suddenly have risen up again, this issue of the transgender ban. And you're looking at this thinking, lots of the things that we felt were historic are no longer historic. Some of the progresses that have been made are suddenly in question again. And one of the things I think that we're addressing is something which looked like a straightforward victory, which I thought everyone had appreciated, victory equality, actually was seen by some people as a loss, as having their rights taken away. And I think that's part of the energy of the piece, which is to say, actually looking at this is not a world we want to go back to. There were no losers. Everyone should be able to contribute. I think all of those issues are in circulation here, and I think they are, as I say, behind glass in the museum.
When you finished writing the finale after you had spent so much, more than a year, I think, so brilliantly crafting the structure, which I'll get to, did you feel angry about Versace and the story, or did you feel, in some ways for you, that it was a catharsis? What did you feel when you were done writing it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a catharsis. It was there was this real sense of exploration. There were things that I touched, and all of us have touched actually and shared, that I actually at some point thought I'd never speak about.
Mm-hmm.
I think in particular, and there's the moment, I think it's ridiculous to say you cry your own piece, and in some ways, I didn't direct the episode, so it doesn't actually feel like I'm crying at something that I'm not crying my thing. And it's the moment where Darren is in the bar in episode 4, and Cody Fern, playing David Madison, goes to the window to look out. And in thrillers, we always have this moment where people are about to escape, and they're going to go into the arms of the police officers, and the police officers put a rug over the shoulder with a cup of coffee. And I remember thinking, actually, this is escape to what? What can you escape to? You can escape to being hated. And he looks out into the world and thinks, this world is not for me. I'd rather stay with the person who at least spins lies around me. And this idea that actually this sense of this world not being a world you feel comfortable in, I don't think I've ever really, I've always felt that, and I've never really got a chance to express that. So when I saw it on, we saw a screening, it was very like, that thing that's inside of you was suddenly up on screen. It was very powerful.
Yeah, I related deeply to that moment too. I remember when I first started writing was right around this time, and one of my first agents was fired in the middle 90s for being gay. And it's not that long ago, So for me, even as a director and working on the pieces in editorial, I was shocked at how much shame, how much pain that we all at that time just sort of, moved through. So I felt it. It was a completely cathartic experience. One of the things that I love the most about the piece is, the ambition of the piece. We set out to tell a story in a very different way than we had before. And I remember when we first had the idea of telling the story sort of backwards, that it was scary and exciting at the same time. So for you as the writer of the piece, how did you keep all of that straight? Can you talk about the organization of the scripts?
Yeah, I didn't find, the backwards narrative, this sounds strange, but felt like it came out of the material itself. We definitely didn't impose that as some kind of trickery or some kind of thing to distinguish it from series one. I remember one of our very first meetings was we have to start with the thing that everyone knew, which was Versace. That was the moment everyone could connect to. And then there was the question of, well, logically, what would the next thing be? And the options were, you could jump back in time, and then we would jump back in time to the school. And so we would have the episode, which is episode 8, which is John Brion's and Darren. Darren is played by a young actor at the beginning. And I was like, to go from a cast of the episode 1 to a completely new cast in episode 8 structurally just didn't make sense. We thought we'd then lose that. So we actually tried it. We actually wrote the episode where we start with Andrew in San Diego, and it just felt like the energy deflated. And so we thought, well, in journeys you start from a place of familiarity, and you nudge into the darkness. And so that became the shape for going backwards. It came very naturally out of the material. It wasn't something any of us imposed. And then what happens is, one of the consequences, and I'd love to say that we thought about at the beginning, but actually it sort of came naturally out of the writing and the story discussions, is that what you did was you said, you didn't say that the first victims are just a kind of stepping stone to Versace, and they're just sort of, that you have this kind of crescendo to this climax. Actually, what you create is a kind of quality between all of these people and say they're all interesting, they're all fascinating, we're going to explore their lives and give them equal weight. And you get that from going backwards in a way that you would if you were going forwards, because you naturally are saying, we're saving this thing for the last moment, which is not what we do.
So Alexis, for you, who was in charge of editing and post-production for all the episodes, did you sort of have a nervous breakdown? What was the challenge for you as the sort of organizing principle in our lives there?
Well, I live to tell a story, and I live to talk, let's be real. So, by the way, thank you guys for coming out and supporting us again. We really appreciate it. I had multiple nervous breakdowns. I believe episode 2, there was a day I stormed into Brad Simpson's office, and I was like, I will edit myself because we're a mixed company. I said, give me the effing timeline, please. Because what happens is you read these scripts, and these scripts are absolutely gorgeous. They are beautifully written. They are wonderful. But when you actually get into the visual of it, sometimes you start to realize we're dealing with, as any editorial program is, you're dealing with pieces of a puzzle. And in dealing with pieces of a puzzle, one piece can fit here and work well, but oh my God, but if you put it here and you move this here, and then you get there here, and then I start running around the room like a crazy person, and my editors get a little nuts, and then I call Ryan, I'm like, I cracked it, it's great. So with a show like this, there were a lot of aha moments, and there were a lot of moments where Ryan and I would sit there and be like, is this right? Is this here? Is this that? And it was a beautiful experience, I think, to look at everybody's work and to understand what our goals were with these gorgeous scripts, and understanding that all of our lives are a little bit of a puzzle that we put together. And so we've established this backwards progression, but there are these little moments where you want to deviate from what was there, because you find, with everything, you find a little bit of beauty that you didn't know. It was that unintentional or accidental beauty. But yeah, episode 2, because with episode 1, we established the murder. We started going back to the beginning, which I love. That was a Ryan Murphy genius moment. And then we get back into the present day kill. When we get to episode 2, suddenly we have a manhunt, kind of within a manhunt, within meeting new characters, and you start to think, I just remember when we figured it out and it really clicked, it was a great feeling because it honored everything. It honored the direction, it honored the script, it honored the performances. And that's what makes, to me, a show like this really special, and what we appreciate with you being here is that it resonates. And so by the time you get to episode 8, it doesn't matter that you've known what's coming. It's the idea of, oh, that's Andrew's young life, because you know him intimately, and you know Versace intimately, and you are so invested because you've gone through every one of those details 6 different ways to get there. And I think it's a very important story and a method of storytelling that it's been a joy to work on.
Very well said. So we have our very first guest here on my talk show tonight. Up on the screen, this is a woman who I've been wanting to work with for 15 years, and I finally talked her into it on this one, Judith Light.
Well, sort of Judith Light. I'm in the middle of shooting this film in New York City, and I wish I could be with you. Go, hi Ryan, hi everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Tell us what you're shooting, Judith.
I'm shooting a feature called Stupid Happy, written by these two wonderful young women, Hannah Ott and Jen Tulloch, and Hannah is also directing. So we are now, we're shooting nights now, so we're in the middle of our day right now. So it's about 11:30 here, so that's what I'm doing.
Thank you for coming.
Of course, I'm thrilled. I wish I could be with you in person.
No. Tell us about, I'm going to be on an echo one. Tell us about Marilyn, which I thought Marilyn Mignon, because I thought you did such a beautiful job with a character. I know that when I offered it to you, I know that playing her was terrifying for you as an actress. I know that you were nervous about it, but in typical Judith fashion, she said, okay, I'm in, and then she just jumped in, fully committed. So can you talk about the process of researching that character? Because Marilyn Mignon has never spoken that publicly about the crime, so there wasn't a lot to go on there. Tell us about the research.
Yeah, I really relied on Maureen's book, and I really used Tom Rocksmith's script as the roadmap that really told me where I needed to go, and I felt very deferential and very careful about never looking at anything that Marilyn had done. I felt that it was really important to make sure that I would not try to copy who she was, but follow the script, and the script was so brilliant, and the whole storytelling was so brilliant, and the direction also. So that was really the way I focused on the part, and the way that it was dynamically structured, where this was and is a woman who is very controlled, held in, and that was really the hardest part. But then there was that scene where she lets go and really expresses the grief that's been boiling underneath. And so those were the kinds of things that I was in the process of really looking at, and how to structure that. And everything was really there in the script.
Right. What I loved about what you did with the role was there was really no judgment towards Marilyn. And I loved that you played it like a real love story, which I thought was so brilliant. I know that Tom had written it that way, but can you talk a little bit about that part of the story and how you played that?
Sure, but when you have somebody like Mike Farrell to work with,
right,
it makes a huge difference. I mean, he was just extraordinary. And we all know at some point or another what it means to live in denial in our lives. The things that we don't want to look at, the things that we push down, the things that we are unwilling to discuss, and then something cataclysmic happens to us, and we have to wake up in some form. Well, theirs was a love story. Theirs was a very deep love story. They were very committed to each other on a lot of different levels. And the real depth of sorrow for me was that this man had to live in this way and couldn't be the person he knew himself to be. And I think at some level, there is that feeling between these two people that they know and nobody's going to say anything. And so they don't say anything, and then this trauma happens.
Right. When you were preparing for the role, we spoke a lot about how she looked and how she moved. And I know that you're an actress who likes to sort of experiment a lot with the look of a character, as we can tell you're doing today. What was the thing that you put on, or that you looked in the mirror and you felt, okay, I have her? Meryl.
One of the things that I so love about you, and the kinds of vision that you carry in the production that you're working on, is that you have a hair, makeup, and wardrobe team that you work very closely with. And I came in for extraordinary. And when I came in for a day of just hair, makeup, wardrobe, and we started early in the morning, and we went all through the day, and we even did the nails. And it was when we put the final look all together, and we were taking the pictures that we were going to be sending over to you to get your final approval on everything. And we looked at the picture of Marilyn, and we looked at the picture of me, and I said, okay, there she is. And that whole team was really so instrumental in creating that character. I mean, it was the minute that I put everything on, the wig and the face and the suits that were made, literally made in practically less than a day for me. I mean, it was quite remarkable. So I would say that's when the moment happened that I said, oh, here she is. I walk in her shoes now.
One of the scenes that you did that became sort of very iconic very quickly that I loved was the removal of the makeup scene, which people have written about a lot, which I thought showed your true talent as a technical actor, because you had to do it over and over and over again so many times, and every take were pitch perfect. Can you talk about that scene? How did you do that technically? Because it was difficult to do.
I had everyone on that crew, every person that was there was in absolute support of what I needed to do that day. Gwyneth Porter Payton is an extraordinary director, and when she structured the scene as to how we would shoot it, so that I was doing it in pieces. And I also knew that this was the most important moment in terms of defining the character of what had been covered over for so long. And that, I have to say, your team, your crew, I mean, they were glorious. I mean, we shot that the day after the Emmys. And I had to get back to New York, but I knew I had the 2 days to stay and shoot with you. And it happened early in the morning after the Emmys that were the night before. So I knew I needed to know the lines. I knew I needed to know them cold. There was just absolutely no way to do that. They were these long monologues. Yeah. And so I said to myself, you do your work. And then I walked in there, and everybody was there like a warm blanket, just ready to hold me and support me. And I would say that I was able to do what I did because of that team.
My last question for you is,
Yes.
I thought you were so brilliant as a perfume saleswoman. I wonder if I came out with a line of Judith Perfumes and Colognes. I mean, you were so good at selling them. Who knew? Now the speakers are muted. Hold on. Okay, now it's fixed. How did you did that so well. You were such a good saleswoman.
Thank you. Thank you. I think, first of all, we, as artists and actors, and we're selling ourselves all the time. We know what some of that is. And for some people who don't know, I was actually the first spokesperson for Proactive Solution, which is an acne product.
Full circle.
And I swear to you, I sold it on QVC. How that system operates. So I felt very blessed that I had that in my background. That made it easier for me. And I just want to say again just how grateful I am to you. And I want to tell one quick story before we leave about you. When this script came to me, and John Robin Bates, who had written this play that I had done in New York, Other Desert Cities, said to me that he wanted me to work with your team, and he said there's going to be this script coming to you. And I was trying to figure out my schedule, and I was talking to wonderful Brad Simpson. Congratulations on your movie coming out today, Brad. And
the movie Crazy Rich Asians.
I said there's one thing that's on my schedule that I absolutely cannot change. And I was opening the AIDS conference in Washington, D.C. on September 7th of last year. And I said, that's the one thing I can't change. I can't get to LA on that day. And I said, if there's anybody in the world that will understand that I can't be there, I'll come the next day. But if there's anybody who will understand that I have to be there, it's Ryan Murphy. And they came back and they said, yep, it's okay. We'll see you the next day. So I really, really, really want to thank you for that.
You are more than welcome. It was part of my evil plan to get you in my world.
Now you're in it, and we love you.
And I love you too. I love you guys.
Thank you.
So one of the things about this show that was such a joy and such an opportunity, and I think you can tell from the camaraderie of the cast, everyone really bonded very quickly and became like a family. The thing about the cast that you should know is they were all my first choices, and they all said yes. And when you have that feeling, when you go into a project, what I felt was, okay, let's roll up our sleeves and get to work, and we all see it the same way, and I felt that was true. Edgar, you're someone who I've loved for a long time, like everyone on this stage, and I saw a picture of you in a magazine, and it was a paparazzi picture, and you were smiling. I don't think I've ever told you this. And it was right when we started to think about this show, and I said, there's our Versace. And once Tom had the first two scripts in, I called Edgar into my office and we talked about it. Can you talk about, like Judith, playing a real person? I know that you spend a lot of time, which I loved, really thinking about, can I do this? Should I do this? And how did you finally get to the place of yes? What was finally the thing, other than Tom Rob's brilliant writing, that pushed you into the idea of like, okay, this could be scary, but I'm gonna do it?
Yeah. I think that when you play biographical characters, it is, and I've said this before, it is very dangerous to believe that the impact or the legacy that a real person has left in the world, regardless of how big or how influential, would automatically translate into an interesting character. Because you still, that life needs to be recreated, it needs to be filled with freshness and with a new life, independently from how impactful the life of that person has been. Mm-hmm. So when you summoned me to your office, and when I went to your office, and then I heard that you wanted to discuss Versace, then already, of course, I was very happy. You know, I was very excited about the possibility of playing someone like that, but I was even more excited because it was going to be in your hands because of the, clearly your track record of what you've done with other amazing characters. And I hadn't experienced the work of Tom at the time, because then you gave me the script, then I saw it, and I thank you because you understood my process. I needed to read more. I mean, I was very excited about the possibility, because I knew that in your hand, in the hand of your team, it was going to be something really interesting, but I needed to see whether the character would transcend the level of presence and to become a force within the script. Mm-hmm. Because for actors, we play forces, not presences, because otherwise that's where that very thin line is. And then of course when I read the scripts, and then when I encountered Tom's work, then that was it. I mean, I know exactly. I remember when I texted you and I said, of course. I mean, we're in. This is incredible. I mean, I knew that I was in for a very transformative ride. Mm-hmm. I knew that it was going to be a very transformative journey because of all the different layers. Because there's something. Well, the World Cup just finished a few weeks ago, and I think that your character can be great, but if the rest of the characters and the rest of the story doesn't work, it's not attractive to me. For me, it's not only about you scoring in your character, I mean, everyone needs to support, and I think that that's, you know, and I thank everybody for being so supportive to the show, because to have 18 nominations is a hint that maybe we did something right. And I really hope that everyone involved in the show, and I join you this comment, everyone involved, all the way from, you know, the youngest PA to everyone, feels represented in these nominations, because we're just, you know, the tip of the iceberg. I mean, it was a common effort, you know.
More than anybody in the cast, I think your transformation was so interesting to me. When Edgar first walked on the set with the hair on and the costume on and the prosthetics on, I remember the entire crew gasped. I think that they were not prepared for how much you inhabited Versace. So what was it like for you, that process when you were in the makeup chair and you finally had it all done? And I know you spent a lot of time researching it with our department heads.
Yeah.
What was it like for you as an actor to physically lose yourself in that body, a different body almost?
Yeah, that was very scary in the first test, because it was the first time that I used prosthetics of that magnitude.
Yeah.
It would really change, you know, the shape of my head. And then when I first saw me, I saw myself.
He was bugging out so
Yeah.
hard. I was like, "You're fine, man. These guys are pros. You're doing no. I think you're great. You look amazing."
And you do remember that on the first day, still, I ran to you and I said, "I'm ready to shave my head. I'm ready to shave my hair and just put the wig on my head, because the things that is so foreign to you, you know."
Yeah.
But of course, I mean, everyone was so supportive, and I remember also when I was doing my last test, Ricky got to the lot, and then he was doing his costume figures, and then I said, "Okay, can you hold on for another 5 minutes there? I need to show you something." And then I ran from one place to the other, and then I burst into, you know, the room, and I said, "Ricky," and then he turned around and saw me, and he started crying.
Yeah.
And he said, "This is Versace." That was very reassuring, but it still was going out.
I didn't know how to talk you off the bridge. I was like,
No, I was very. It was a lot. I mean, it was the hair, it was the weight, and then it was the accent, and of course, I mean, I had endless conversations about it with Penelope as well. That these characters, Gianni and Donatella, are public, you know,
people.
Exactly. I mean, everybody knows them, and people know how they speak, and of course, there's always that very, 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 very fine line between, you know, when you do biographical characters, it's never a photograph, it is a painting.
Mm-hmm.
It's an approximation to what that character could have been, because otherwise it falls into the category of imitation or impersonation. That's a different form of, that's different, you know?
Yeah.
It's so the risk to jump, you know, over the board and then get into caricature territory was always there, and you're always walking that line, you know. And but I think that also because of the amazing people I worked with, you know, I mean, all the way from the crew and also Ricky and Penelope, I think that I also found the character in their eyes, because one thing, and it brings me back to when I read the first 3 or 2 episodes before we decided to do this. There are many layers in this show, and there's one that have been you know, in my mind for weeks, the last weeks, and it's how much of a family story this show is.
Right.
Because this show deals with every character. I mean, when you look at every episode, there's always an exploration of the complexity of family relationships. They are the most complicated, the most complex, because oftentimes you end up hurting the people you love the most. But in order to help them according to how you see it, then you end up hurting them. And that is something that happens constantly. And then you see how 2 families, one was able to stick together through adversity and to deal with all the punches that life was giving them, and then they tried to work it out, they overcame it, and even when the son of that universe, who was Gianni, disappeared, creating this deep and horrible vacuum that would always suck every member of the family, they were able to manage. And then that's the Versace family, and then you have the Cunanan family, that unfortunately couldn't work out, you know, their shortcomings and their frustrations, and in the end, they created somebody who would destroy so much.
Right.
So yeah, I mean for me that's and that was something that when I realized that this character was gonna deal, because the exuberance and the lush and the beauty of Versace's legacy that was right there already. But what I loved about the show is how we got into the microscopical world of family relationships and the family bonds, and then to explore that through Donatella's character with Antonio, and Antonio with Donatella. It was beautiful for me to be there, because he was the center of that dynamic.
Darren, you and I spoke about this role very early on in the creative process, because I've obviously worked with Darren before on a show called Glee.
Woo! Yes!
I remember watching Darren, and the weird thing about that show is I never really directed Darren. I was always sort of around. I think I directed you in one scene.
For like
one
10 seconds,
scene,
yeah.
very quickly. But I remember being struck by, I was like, Darren is really a great dramatic actor. And so, long story short, I called you and I said I have this part, and to me you're the only actor who could play this part. And I wonder if you could speak, and you told me this very movingly, that an actor's career is only as good as the possibilities and the things that are presented to them. Can you talk about, and it's also very hard for a young actor to get really great, meaty parts like Hunan is and was. What was that like for you? Can you talk about that?
Man, well, first of all, how's everybody doing? I know you've been sitting here for a while. Are you okay? First time we get to talk about this with each other, whether you were here or not, so thank you for your attention for being here. I mean, I'm glad you remember that, because I feel that wholeheartedly. I mean, unless you're an auteur creating work for yourself, you really, truly are only as good as the moments you're giving and the opportunities you're given, which are, for the most part, out of your hands. And yeah, this is a part, and not only a part, but a project in the story, because it's not just a part of Kunana, it also has to be, it's this incredibly complex and endlessly interesting person that exists in this extraordinary story that you can't believe actually happened, that is done with an echelon of people that is so top-notch that there's too many things about it that just make it such an unbelievably amazing experience. So just getting to do any of that was such a thrill, just to be kind of included. But what's nice about this particular character, which I find Shakespearean in its sort of construct, there's so many things about the story that echo the great Greek tragedies and horrific famous operas, you know, of these characters that are so grandiose that they have to be fictional, but he was a real fucking person. And so in a way, you know, being a theater nerd, you know, studying absurd characters your whole life, you kind of find ways in with somebody like Andrew that would be easier if you weren't as sort of into those kinds of stories. But
were you nervous?
No, not at all. I've been waiting and working for this moment my entire life. And
that's one thing that I felt, you know, the very first day, I believe the very first scene which I directed with Darren was in the pilot, and I thought to myself, this is kind of the hardest scene ever, so let's see what he's gonna do. And it was a scene where Andrew was on the beach, and he picks up the gun, and he goes into the water, and it's scripted, and I told Darren, okay, when you get out there and it's up to your waist, I just want you to scream and summon the deepest, most powerful grief that you have. And he said, okay, man. And it was the very first take that we did is in the show. And I felt after that take like he really is ready. He really is excited.
well, we actors, we wait on the sidelines, you know, and it really is a matter, and as we've done all night, giving credit to you, Ryan, and you've done this with people, not just with me, a lot of people, a lot of beloved actresses later on in their career, or younger actors, as shown with our show, given a lot of amazing opportunity to people. I mean,
you really are just waiting for someone to pass you the ball. And what I always like to give you credit for is not again. Somebody asked me, "Do you think Ryan cast you because he knew he thinks you're crazy or some kind of murderous person?" And while I get the facetiousness of that question, I think you. I appreciate that you acknowledge that I'm an artisan and that there is a craft at play that I apply with the same gravitas as I would, a teenager in a blazer singing, as I do to Andrew Cunanan. Now, they exist in obviously very different worlds with very different languages and very different tools at their disposal, but I treat it with this exact same process. And you acknowledging that within me is an opportunity that I'll be grateful for the rest of my life. But I'll quickly say just on sort of what it is to dive into Andrew this entire process. I think Tom sort of spoke to this. There's so many things about Andrew that we can key into quite easily. The story is a coming of age tragedy, and we are looking for so many reasons to like this person, even though we have every reason not to. And I think I've been really pleased with people telling me how conflicted they were watching Andrew's story because, obviously we know that he is famous for deplorable, awful, horrific things. And, by no means am I seeking, as our show or me as an actor, seeking exoneration or forgiveness or even sympathy. It's not a prerequisite to watch this show. But I think that sort of twisting of people's considerations is sort of one of the, at its core, one of my favorite things about storytelling is that we can proactively question things that would be absurd to question, And the reason why I bring it up is because that was a goal for me, at least for Andrew, to try and make him as accessible. That was the mountain to climb. If we know him, that's why we did the show in the way we did. And we start with its most terrible, and we kind of this reverse redemption story where we have to try and put as much humanity into this person as possible. And
we spoke about that, you and I, where the idea was that no one is born a monster. Monsters are created. I thought that was an important part of the show. For Finn, who I've worked with several times now as well, when you finished shooting this role, which was so grueling, I have a couple questions for you. You said playing this part was a gift. Can you talk about that? How was it a gift for you?
I learned a lot about sort of the contradictions that can exist in one person. But it's like someone who truly is a patriot and a kind of Jeff Trail is actually kind of like conservative if you listen to him talking. Like he believed in America. He believed in, like, he wanted to sacrifice himself for his country. And in his mind, this wasn't a contradiction, but to me, before this, it might have been a contradiction that he was also gay and he was, like, not really in the mold that he was molded to be, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so that these two very different things could exist within him, and that, like for instance, when he is going to go and kill himself in the bathroom, he goes and puts on his uniform first. That, as opposed to like wanting to destroy the system, like he wanted to die as a sailor, as a person in the Navy. That he maintained this love for a country that was being pretty awful to him. Mm-hmm. That those two things could exist, and then that same guy can kind of fall into the beautiful dark clutches of this guy. I think it was a gift because it gave me so many more complications that I thought could exist.
Like all the actors on the show, I know everybody fell into sort of the Wikipedia, YouTube wormhole.
Yeah.
Wow.
Thank God for that.
And you and I spoke about it a lot, but you really studied the interview.
Yeah.
Don't Ask, Don't Tell interview that Mr. Trail did in real life. Talk about that.
There was, it's one of these interviews where his face is in shadow and he's speaking as an anonymous person, because he's telling something that if he was revealed, he would definitely be kicked out of the Navy, and he sort of kind of was after some time. And then to watch that, there's a whole documentary about like don't ask, don't tell at that time, and there's even like this stuff like sort of secret footage of like finding like the little gay bar near the military base, and these guys' faces are blurred out, like pixelated, you know, and they're like, yeah, we just come here to have a good time, you know. So that was like a continual reference for me. Like I recorded it on my phone, and sort of whenever I was a little bit lost, I would sort of go back, and it was like a touchstone to kind of continue, to like just viscerally kind of get right back into him. Because you hear his voice, you can't see him, but you can hear in his voice in that interview that there's so much, there's like, he's so repressed in a very noble way.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
I thought the shame of him, that interview was so palpable and deep.
And yet he's so ashamed of what he's saying, and he feels like he has to say it, because it's the right thing to do. Yeah.
What do you think you would think of Trump?
Well, it's, you want to go to that? It's funny, because I remember, honestly, when I first read it, I was like, yeah, I mean, it's cool. I mean, don't ask, don't tell. It's pretty dated. I mean, you know, that's not really a thing that happens anymore. And literally, I think as we started shooting it, this transgender man happened, and it was like, oh wow, I think this is a lot more relevant than I even realized.
Right.
And yeah, I mean, it's just sad that I'm not as much of a patriot as this guy was. These people that are willing to sacrifice their lives for our country, and we're ostracizing them because of their sexual orientation. I mean, it literally makes no sense at all. I mean, it's pretty obvious, but that's
So we have another special guest ready, but before we do, I have very quickly for Darren and for Edgar. What was the most difficult moment for you both as actors to shoot in this show? That tested you the most.
Well, something I was going to talk about earlier, that it was sort of an all-pervading challenge to everything that I was really beating myself up about. But something that was the most scary was actually the biggest saving grace. It was kind of a safety net, because unlike, as I hear you guys speak about sort of YouTube or the wormhole of information, there is a bizarrely small, there's a huge lack of footage of Andrew Cunanan, and Tom can attest to this. We've all gone down as many wormholes as we can with finding stuff of Andrew, and there is next to nothing. And so for me, I'm very fastidious about trying to find the voice, the walk, the talk, the kind of everything about Andrew has to tell a story. Everything has to indicate his sort of constant power struggle, whether it's the way he carries himself, whether it's the pace at which he's talking. There's things that can key into who this guy was, and I was so ravenous to find out what the fuck that is. And I couldn't. And what was amazing is because he was so many different people to so many different people, it kind of gave me carte blanche to kind of just focus on who this person would be with this particular person, because he would whatever was useful at the time is what he would use. But I think there were a lot of moments where, when we see Andrew by himself, when he's stripped away of all these identities that he's clung to identify himself with, who the fuck is he when he's by himself? Who is he at his core? And that was really scary, because I really didn't know, and we'll never know. So I guess my sort of guiding light in Sherpa is the scripts that Tom has written, and sort of we have to kind of make a conscious choice that we're going to tell this story, he's going to be this certain way. But that's only the version of Andrew that we know in this story. Like, we really don't know. So that was a constant challenge to me. It's the stuff where he couldn't rely on these different tools he would use to tell his story. When
Just you alone.
Just to him alone, it's tough. We just don't know. So you have to make just a choice and roll with that. So hopefully it works. I mean, I have to give it to Alexis, because a lot of that stuff I think turned out a whole lot better than I remember doing it. So.
Well, you told the story better than I remember doing it. Edgar, for you, what was your hardest moment?
Well, I think the one that comes up to my head now is, as I was saying before, Johnny was the sun of this galaxy, this universe, and a lot of different planets were orbiting around him, and I think that his greatest fear was to, as it happened to, I mean, you don't have to be a global fashion icon to have that feeling when you're close to your family. You're a fundamental part of that family, and the fear of what happens if I go away and I don't leave things ready. And in that, you know, when we got to that dynamic, when he was preparing Donatella to succeed, it was that the whole process of knowing that the clock was ticking, and that not only a physical disappearance was taking place, also it could lead to a moral and social disappearance as well, and social shame. And the fact that he was really running against time to leave things ready, and then he started to be so nervous and so bitter to the people that he loved the most. So by the time we were shooting that, I mean, I had already fallen in love with Penelope, with Ricky, and I was really mistreating them in the scenes. And I don't know. I mean, for me, what I do, I mean, I'm the happiest guy on earth just by the fact that I get to work in what I love. So for me, that's good, and it could be, you know, I think that's a huge privilege, not only for an actor, for any person in the world, to go to work and feel so happy and inspired, because it's not work anymore. And that's why when I answer these questions, I put myself in the moment again, and those are my memories, you know. And then I remember the moment where he lost his hearing.
Mm-hmm.
That was very hard, because he came face to face with an unquestionable sign that he was going away.
Right.
And not only he was fading away, his legacy was not ready, and the last moment that he could remember was fighting the people that he loved the most, his family and his lover, right in that scene. So that when he cuts that dress, and he has this, it all happens in the same scene. So, and thank you, Tom, for writing such a beautiful scene. I mean, you have put in my mouth some of the most beautiful lines I've ever said in my career. And then all of that happened, and there was in the same scene, and he went from rage to absolute fear and horror, because he was losing it. He was going away. He was fading, and he didn't even know if he would have the opportunity to apologize because of how he was behaving in that very scene. I don't know, all those thoughts, you know, all those feelings came to me to that moment, and that was a beautiful challenge, you know.
Speaking of which, our next guest has been up since 4 in the morning to be with us. He is touring. He is in Europe. I think it's...
Yes, right. We feel the same way.
So I believe Ricky Martin is here. Hello. Have you had your coffee, Rick?
Coffee, of course. And I'm doing great. Thank you so much. How's everyone doing?
We're very good. We're missing you.
I wish I was right now, I promise.
Let's talk about, this is a part, I've known Rick for a while. This is a part that you as an actor, you really went after this part. You really wanted it. You believed in it so much. You believed, I know, in the story so much. Can we talk about, like Versace, you are an icon. I was so moved by how deeply you wanted this role. I met Rick to talk about this at the Tower Bar and Grill, and he pretended the whole meeting that he was not best friends with Edgar, and at the end when I offered him the part, it turns out that they were best friends. Can you talk about your love of this role and what it meant to you? Why were you so passionate about it?
Well, just the same way I was passionate to wake up this morning at 4 o'clock in the morning, right? And this is full-on activism. You know, you told me the story, and you gave me the opportunity to talk on behalf of those that are struggling right now, not only with their sexual identity, but with so many levels of injustice. Right. Everything that was happening around Gianni and his couple, Antonio and Nico, was just devastating, and just to know that this could happen over and over again, I said we need to be loud, we need to be very specific, and we need to be really aggressive about telling the story to see if we can really make a difference in everyone. You know, there's part of the LGBT community that are really struggling with what's happening. And then on top of that, I had the opportunity to talk to Antonio D'Amico himself. And he was incredibly generous. He told me everything that he went through emotionally when he found the body. First of all, I had no easy scenes in this series. Every scene was complicated. Every scene was dramatic, was intense, was painful. There were moments, of course, where we wanted to share with the audience the love that Gianni and Antonio had for each other, because at the end of the day, part of my mission was to shed some light into what they had, to what they created after 15 years of being together. But at the end of the day, it was all about, wearing Antonio's shoes and feeling what he went through when he found the body. And then what he went through, what triggered him to even consider suicide. It's been a different, life-changing experience, and I will always be so grateful. Right now, I'm just celebrating that I'm here sitting with you, because I know that this conversation will be of impact for a lot of people that are struggling and that are dealing right now with the level of injustice, not only in America, but I just came back from Dubai, and people were asking me what it was like to play Antonio. And the fact that the media in Dubai, such a conservative country, were open to talk about this, man, Ryan, we made a difference. This is something to celebrate, just because it's really moving, it's really touching.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. Can I ask you a question of you were a worldwide icon already at the time that this show is set. You've been working since you were a very young man. You were famous very quickly. And like Versace and many, many other people at this period of time, you were not allowed to be who you were. You felt that you could not be out of the closet. You had pressure. I know you've written a book, you've spoken about it so beautifully and movingly. What was it like for you as a man who had suffered, obviously, a lot of emotional stress and duress, to go back to that painful time in your life and to try and step into those shoes and be back there? What was that like for you as an actor?
Well, one thing that I learned at the age of 15, when I had the opportunity to do my first television series in Argentina, my acting coach told me, Ricky, actors don't know how to lie. So you gotta live, you gotta wear their shoes, you gotta become that person. And I lived as Antonio. I had to separate myself from my family, because obviously my kids, my husband, they bring the light into my life. And I needed to be alone. I needed to spend time and go through the process, go through the mourning, feel the pain. There was a moment when we were shooting in Miami that I said, Edgar, come to my room, let's bring friends, let's try to jump for a minute to another side, because this is very deep for me and I'm getting really affected. In fact, there's a funny moment where at the end of when I saw the final episode, I called Penelope and I'm like, Penelope, I'm really affected by this. This is the saddest thing I'm going through. And she said, Ricky, okay, I know it's very sad, but we have to move on to the next project, because if not, you will be locked in this for a while. Right. I once again, it was very healthy for me to relive everything.
You felt it was a catharsis in many ways.
It was a cathartic, I mean, just for me to to relive what it was like when we shot the scene where Johnny accepts or comes out to the media and introduces me as his couple, as his partner. I remember when I had to hide my partners, my boyfriends, because I was not ready to accept, and not only accept, but share with the world my sexual identity. So it was very moving. It was reliving. It's something very powerful, and I swear I think it just made me a better person to go through it again. It's like reading my book all over again.
Yeah.
But in this case, I was just reliving it in front of the cameras, directed by incredible directors, surrounded by an amazing group of actors that were very generous and supportive. And I still see this. I've seen the whole series over and over again, and I get really affected. And I hope people out there get just as affected as I get every time I see it again.
What was the last question for you, because I know you have touring to do here. What was it like? You began this project. You were very close with Edgar already. You were very close with Penelope, and the three of you were sort of bonded in a very deep way before we began the sort of painful process of these scenes. How did that help you? What was that like? Because you went into the project already part of this family. What did you draw on there?
Once again, I will always be very thankful for their generosity. I mean, we became a family, and from the technical aspect of it, of like, okay, what is your accent gonna be like? We are a family here. We have to have kind of like the same accent. So what is this gonna be like? So we were making fun of it, but at the same time, we would go home, and Darren, even though I didn't have scenes with him, we would go home. We would spend Sundays afternoons at home and just being ourselves and just getting to know each other. But we just went to another level of unity. And I remember shooting the scene after I was interrogated by the FBI, and Penelope walks in and she thought it was going to be a rehearsal, and all of a sudden she said, "No, we're shooting. Let's make this happen." And she told me, "Ricky, you're making it difficult. I'm supposed to not like you. I'm supposed to hate you." and I'm feeling so much compassion towards you and towards what you're feeling. In the meantime, I'm just covered in blood, and as you know, Ryan, I was crying and dealing with this at 6 a.m. in the morning, and it was already 7 o'clock at night, and we were still there, and I was still completely covered in blood. It was very powerful, but once again, super thankful, super humbled to be able to work with such stellar actors and people that I don't want to sound dramatic, but yes, I am dramatic. It changed my life.
Well, bus and pulled over and found a hotel room that would allow him to have Wi-Fi and Skype. So thank you, we love you. We will see you. So I guess our last question before we wrap it up, we were so blessed. I think you can feel the love that we all have for each other on this stage. And we were so lucky that we got to shoot in Versace's house. We actually shot in the mansion where he lived and where he was killed on the front steps. And for everybody that was there, what was it like for you to be there? Did you feel him? What was your experience? For me, when I was scouting and Brad and Tom and I were looking at that place, I remember I really felt him with us. And I felt that, I remember feeling like I loved him and I wanted to make him proud and show the injustice of what had happened and also what had happened in the period. What did you guys feel about that place and him? Anybody who was there?
I had a very profound reaction to it when I walked in, simply because, I was about to inhabit the person that destroyed the legacy of this building. Mm-hmm. And just the casualness of just walking through these gates not only struck me for obvious reasons because of the relationship to Versace himself, but to Andrew, here's a guy that literally, figuratively, was outside of the gates his entire life. And there I was, just walking right in. And that really hit me, just this stark juxtaposition of this life that I've been so blessed with, and a life that was cursed in a way, that really just broke my heart into a million little pieces. And then being dressed in the same outfit that he would have been in, waltzing around the house, saying hi to Ricky, saying hi to Edgar, grabbing a sandwich. I mean, there was this sort of, the incongruity really shook me. I felt like, is this appropriate? Should I not be feeling good about today? It was a really bizarre feeling, and I had a moment where I just walked in. It's a beautiful building, so I wanted to walk around and just appreciate the architecture. And I didn't know what room was what room. There were all these ornate things that I just ended up in one room, and it was quiet, nobody was there. I ended up in this one place where I really sort of felt this presence, and I grew up in a very Catholic household, and I guess, I have that connection with not only Andrew, but obviously with Johnny. And I don't want to get too spiritual, but I kind of said a prayer to not only in general, but to Johnny, and just, I really hoped, in the same way you hoped he would be proud, you wanted to make him proud. I had this moment of sort of recognizing the absurdity of me being in these clothes, playing this character, and what would I say to him? And I just wanted to sort of somehow cosmically convey to him that